For 18 years, the system told me I was nobody's son. On the day I was set to be released with nothing but a backpack and a bus ticket, a single yellowed envelope proved them wrong. It didn't just give me a past, it gave me a future I'd have to fight for. If you know what it's like to stand on a threshold, not knowing what's next, and hoping for a sign, then this story is for you. And if you feel that connection, maybe hit that subscribe button. We tell stories here for people who find their way in the dark. The air in Miss Albright's office always smelled the same: stale coffee, cheap disinfectant, and the faint papery scent of forgotten files. It was the smell of my entire life, condensed into one small beige room. I sat opposite her desk, my hands resting on my knees, trying to look calm. Inside, my stomach was a knot of cold wires. Today was my 18th birthday, the day of my release. Freedom, they called it. To me, it felt like being pushed off a cliff in the dark. "Well, Leo," she said, her voice attempting a warmth it never quite achieved. She slid a thin manila folder across the desk. It was my life, summarized in a dozen stapled pages: reports, assessments, relocation notices. The official record of an unwanted boy. "This is it. You're officially an adult. The state's responsibility for you has concluded." I nodded, not trusting my voice. For 12 years, since I was 6, I'd been a responsibility. A case number, a line item in a budget. Now, that was over. I had a duffel bag at my feet containing 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback, and a toothbrush. The state had provided a one-way bus ticket to the city and a check for $200, meant to last until I found a job and a place to live. It was a joke, and we both knew it. "There are resources," she continued, reciting a speech I'm sure she'd given 100 times. "Shelters, job placement programs. The numbers are all in this packet." She pushed a pristine white envelope toward me, a stark contrast to my worn file. It was full of pamphlets for a life I couldn't imagine living. I took it. My fingers brushed against hers and she flinched just slightly. It was a familiar reaction. In the system, you learn that touch is transactional, not comforting. I was a file to be closed, a box to be checked. "Thank you, Miss Albright," I managed to say. The words felt like stones in my mouth. She gave a tight, professional smile. "Good luck, Leo." She stood up, a clear dismissal. Our time was up. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder and turned to leave. My hand was on the doorknob when she spoke again, her voice different this time, less practiced. "Wait, there's one more thing." I turned back. She was holding another envelope. This one was old, the paper yellowed and soft with age, the corners creased and worn. It looked like something that had been lost in a drawer for a very long time. My name, Leo Vance, was written on the front in faded blue ink. The handwriting was elegant, a series of delicate loops and curves that felt deeply unfamiliar. It wasn't the blocky, impersonal print of the state. "This was left for you," she said, her brow furrowed in mild confusion. "It was in your original intake file from when you first came to us. There were instructions. We were ordered to hold it until your 18th birthday. Legally, we couldn't give it to you a day sooner." She held it out to me. I took it, my fingers trembling slightly. The envelope was thick, heavier than it should be. It didn't feel like just a letter. It felt like it had weight, substance. For my entire life, I had been told there was nothing. No family, no relatives, no one who had asked for me. My mother, I'd been told, had relinquished her rights. The official term was abandonment, a clean break. But this envelope, this was not a clean break, this was a loose thread. a piece of a story I never knew existed. "Do you know who it's from?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Miss Albright shook her head, her expression unreadable. There was no return address. The instructions were sealed with the original file. "That's all I know, Leo. It's yours now." I stared at the name on the front. Leo Vance. A name that had always felt borrowed, a label assigned to me. But seeing it written in that flowing script, it suddenly felt real. It felt like mine. I clutched the envelope in my hand, the crisp edges of whatever was inside pressing into my palm. I walked out of her office, down the long, sterile hallway of the St. Jude's Home for Boys, and pushed open the heavy front doors. The city air hit me, a mix of exhaust fumes and rain-soaked pavement. It was the first breath of my new life, and it tasted of fear, uncertainty, and the ghost of a promise held in a yellowed envelope. I had no idea that this single piece of mail, delivered 18 years late, wasn't just a letter. It was a map that would lead me away from the future the state had planned for me, and toward a past I was never supposed to find. A past waiting for me behind a weathered farmhouse door, in a place I'd never heard of, where my name was already carved in wood. The bus station was a chaotic symphony of hurried announcements, crying children, and the weary sighs of people going somewhere, or running from something. I felt invisible, just another face in the river of humanity flowing through the terminal. I found a seat in the back of the bus heading north. The vinyl cracked and cool against my skin. The $200 check felt like a burning coal in my pocket, a countdown timer to homelessness. The city was my destination, according to the ticket, but it felt like a dead end. Another system, bigger and colder than the one I'd just left. As the bus rumbled out of the city, the skyscrapers giving way to suburbs and then to endless stretches of highway, I finally pulled out the yellowed envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. For my whole life, the past was a locked door. This felt like a key. My fingers were clumsy as I carefully worked open the sealed flap, trying not to tear the fragile paper. The glue was old and gave way with a soft crackle. Inside, there wasn't a letter, not at first. The first thing I pulled out was a key. It was old, made of heavy dark iron, the kind you see in movies about castles and dungeons. It was ornate, with a circular head and a complex, toothed bit. It felt ancient and important. Along with the key was a single, folded document. The paper was thick and brittle, and when I unfolded it, I saw the formal, printed lines of a legal deed. My eyes scanned the document, my mind struggling to catch up. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of a property. A property located in a town I'd never heard of, Sparrow Creek. My breath caught in my throat when I saw the names. The grantor, Sarah Vance. The grantee, Leo Vance. Sarah Vance, my mother. It was the first time I'd ever seen her name written down outside of a redacted legal file. It was real. She was real. And she had given me something. Not just given, transferred. Ownership. I ran my finger over my own name, printed neatly on the line. Leo Vance. Owner. I stared out the window, but I didn't see the blur of trees and fields passing by. I saw a name. Sarah. I whispered it to myself. It felt foreign, yet deeply familiar, like a word from a dream you can't quite remember. The file said she'd abandoned me. A clean break, but this wasn't abandonment. This was a plan. A strange, silent plan that had been waiting 18 years to unfold. I looked at my bus ticket. It was for a city 200 miles south. Sparrow Creek, according to the map on my phone, was 100 miles in the opposite direction. A tiny, insignificant dot in the middle of a vast green expanse of rural countryside. The $200 from the state was meant to be a lifeline. It wasn't enough for a deposit on an apartment, barely enough for a week in a cheap motel. It was designed to force you into the shelter system, to keep you dependent. But now I had something else. A deed, a key, a place, a choice. I could follow the path laid out for me, the path to the city, to the shelters, to the life of a former foster kid struggling to stay afloat. Or I could follow this thread, this ghost of a message from a mother I never knew. I could go to Sparrow Creek. It was a wild, reckless idea. The property could be a ruin. The deed could be meaningless. The whole thing could be a cruel joke. But it was the only thing in my entire life that had ever been given to me, truly given, from someone who shared my name. The bus pulled into a rest stop, the hiss of the air brakes jolting me from my thoughts. The driver announced a 15-minute break. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked to the front of the bus, the deed and the key clutched in my hand. "Excuse me," I said to the driver, a burly man with a kind, tired face. "I need to change my destination." He looked at me over his glasses. "This bus is going to the city, son, end of the line." "I know," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "Is there a bus from here that goes north, toward Sparrow Creek?" He grunted, pulling out a tangled schedule book. He flipped through the pages. "Sparrow Creek? Ain't much out there. But yeah, there's a local line that passes through. Leaves in 20 minutes from Bay 4. You'll have to buy a new ticket." I nodded. It would take a quarter of my $200, a quarter of my entire net worth, gambled on a rusty key and a piece of paper. It was the stupidest and the bravest thing I had ever done. "I'll take it," I said. I bought the ticket, my hand steady. As I stood waiting at Bay 4, I looked back at the bus I had just gotten off of, the one heading toward the life everyone expected me to have. For a moment, a wave of panic washed over me. I was alone, heading to a place I didn't know, based on a clue from a ghost. But then I looked down at the key in my palm. It was solid. It was real. Whatever was waiting for me in Sparrow Creek, it was a story that was mine. And for the first time, I felt like I was walking toward something instead of just running away. The new bus arrived, smaller and older than the last one. I got on, took a seat by the window, and watched as we pulled away from the rest stop, turning north into the unknown. The journey to Sparrow Creek felt like traveling back in time. The 4-lane highway gave way to a 2-lane road, and then to a winding country lane flanked by dense forests and rolling fields. The bus was mostly empty, carrying only a few locals who got on and off at unmarked crossroads, disappearing down dirt paths. The air that came through the open window was clean and smelled of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the city smog I was used to. I finally arrived in the late afternoon. The bus didn't so much pull into a station as it did slow down in the middle of what appeared to be the town's only street. "Sparrow Creek," the driver called out, and I grabbed my duffel bag, my heart beginning to race again. The town was small, impossibly small. A single main street with a handful of storefronts. A grocery store with a faded sign, a diner with a buzzing neon open light, a hardware store, and a post office. A few people milled about, their faces weathered and unfamiliar. They looked at me with a mild, unthreatening curiosity, the kind reserved for a stranger in a place that doesn't get many. I knew I needed 2 things, directions and food. The diner seemed like the best bet for both. I pushed open the door, a tiny bell chiming my arrival. Inside, it was warm and smelled of coffee and fried bacon. A woman with a kind wrinkled face and a cloud of white hair stood behind the counter. "Afternoon, hun, take a seat anywhere," she said with a genuine smile. I slid into a booth by the window and ordered a coffee and a burger. While I waited, I pulled out the deed again, staring at the address listed. 14 at Reformatory, Blackbird Lane. When the woman brought my food, I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm looking for an address. 14 Blackbird Lane." Her smile faltered for just a second, replaced by a look of gentle concern. "Blackbird Lane? Sure, I know it. It's a ways out of town. You head east, past the old mill, and it's the last property before the road turns to dirt. But nobody's lived out at the old Vance place in years. Not since Sarah." She trailed off, wiping the counter with a cloth. "It's been empty a long time. Place must be falling apart. The old Vance place. My place. I know," I said quietly. "It's complicated." She seemed to understand that I didn't want to explain. She just nodded, refilled my coffee, and left me to my meal. The burger was the best I'd ever had, but I barely tasted it. My mind was already out on Blackbird Lane, picturing a house I'd never seen. After I paid, I followed her directions, walking east through the small town. The pavement soon ended, just as she'd said, and the road became a gravel path. The houses grew farther apart, replaced by thick woods and overgrown fields. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the road. It was quiet. The only sounds were the crunch of my footsteps on the gravel and the chirping of crickets in the tall grass. After walking for what felt like miles, I saw it. Through a break in the trees, set back from the road at the end of a long, weed-choked driveway, stood a farmhouse. It was a simple, two-story wooden structure, its white paint peeled and weathered to a ghostly gray. The roof sagged in the middle, and several windows were boarded up. A large oak tree stood sentinel in the front yard, its branches like gnarled arms reaching for the house. It looked forgotten. It looked haunted, but it was standing. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the Vance place. I walked up the driveway, my boots sinking into the soft earth. The air grew cooler as I stepped into the shadow of the house. The front porch steps groaned under my weight, and I had to push my way through overgrown vines to reach the front door. It was made of heavy, dark wood, scarred by years of weather, and that's when I saw it. There, on the door, just above a tarnished brass knob, was a name, carved into the wood with uneven, childlike letters. Leo. I dropped my duffel bag. My hand flew to my mouth, my fingers tracing the deep grooves of the letters. L-E-O, my name. Below it was a date, also carved into the wood, October 12th. 16 years ago, my second birthday. A tidal wave of emotion crashed over me, so powerful it buckled my knees. This wasn't just a property. This wasn't just a house. This was a home. My home. Someone had stood here, on this porch, 16 years ago, and carved my name into this door. It was a declaration, a promise. You belong here. Tears. I didn't know I had been holding back for years began to stream down my face. All my life I had been a ghost, a transient, a boy with no anchor. I had believed I was a mistake, a loose end. But this carving, this simple, crude etching in a forgotten door, told a different story. It said I was remembered, I was claimed. My hand shook as I pulled the iron key from my pocket. It looked ancient, but as I slid it into the keyhole, it felt like it had been made for this lock. There was a moment of resistance, a grinding of old, rusty metal. I put my shoulder into it, turning the key with all my strength. With a loud, resonant clunk, the lock gave way. The sound echoed in the twilight silence, a sound of finality, of arrival. I pushed the door open. It swung inward on creaking hinges, revealing a dark, silent interior, thick with the smell of dust, decay, and time. I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold, out of the life I had known, and into the one that had been waiting for me all along. The air inside the house was thick and still, heavy with the scent of old wood, dust, and a faint lingering perfume I couldn't place. Something floral, like dried lavender. A thick blanket of dust covered everything, turning the furniture into pale, ghostly shapes in the fading light from the open door. I stood in what must have been the entryway, a small foyer that opened into a larger living space. To my left, a staircase ascended into the darkness of the second floor. To my right, a doorway led into what I guessed was a living room. I dropped my duffel bag by the door with a soft thud, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence of the house. I hadn't thought to bring a flashlight, and my phone battery was critically low. I had maybe an hour of daylight left, at most. I had to make it count. I moved slowly, cautiously, into the living room. A sofa and 2 armchairs, all draped in white sheets, were arranged around a large stone fireplace. The mantelpiece above it was bare, save for a thick layer of grime. I ran my finger through it, leaving a clean streak. This place hadn't just been left. It had been prepared. The sheets over the furniture weren't a sign of hasty departure. They were a sign of intended return. Someone had planned to come back. My heart ached with a question I was too afraid to ask. Why didn't you? I moved through the downstairs rooms like a ghost myself. The dining room had a large wooden table and 6 chairs, also covered. The kitchen was a time capsule from another era. A yellowing refrigerator stood in the corner, its door slightly ajar. The counters were bare. Every drawer I opened, every cabinet I peered into was empty. The house had been scrubbed clean of all personal effects, all signs of life. It was like a museum exhibit titled, "The Day We Vanished." As the last vestiges of sunlight disappeared, a deep, primal fear began to creep in. The darkness in the house felt different from the darkness of the dorms at St. Jude's. That was a familiar dark, filled with the sounds of other boys breathing, coughing, turning in their sleep. This was an absolute, profound darkness, a silence so deep it felt like a presence. I was utterly alone. I decided sleeping in the house was too much for the first night. The porch felt safer, more connected to the outside world. I retrieved my duffel bag and sat on the top step, my back against the door with my name on it. I ate a protein bar from my bag and drank the last of my water, watching the stars emerge in the clear, rural sky. I had never seen so many. In the city, the light pollution washed them all away. Here, they were a brilliant, glittering canopy. I thought about my mother, Sarah. Who was she? Why go to all this trouble? Preserving the house, creating the deed, leaving the key, only to disappear. The official story was abandonment, but nothing about this place felt like abandonment. It felt like a sanctuary, put into hibernation. The next morning, I woke up stiff and cold. Dew settled on my jacket. My first priority was supplies. I walked the long road back into town, the morning mist still clinging to the fields. At the hardware store, I spent another $50, a quarter of my remaining funds, on a powerful flashlight, work gloves, a pry bar, and a large canister of water. The man at the counter, a grizzled old-timer with kind eyes, looked at my purchases. "Doing some workout at the old Vance place?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I was surprised he knew. "Yeah, how'd you know?" He chuckled. "Small town, son, word gets around. A stranger asking for Blackbird Lane at the diner. That's front-page news here." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "Be careful out there. That house has been sitting a long time. Could be rot in the floors, critters in the walls. You need anything, you come see me. Name's George." "Leo," I said, shaking his outstretched hand. His grip was like iron. It was the first friendly, unprompted gesture I'd received in years. It felt nice. Back at the house, armed with my new flashlight, I felt braver. I started my search on the second floor. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. There were 3 rooms upstairs, 2 small bedrooms, both empty, and a larger master bedroom at the end of the hall. This room felt different. It wasn't empty. A large 4-poster bed, stripped of its mattress, stood against the far wall. A wardrobe was in one corner, its doors shut tight. A small vanity table with a clouded mirror sat beneath a window. This had been her room. I knew it instantly. I could almost feel her presence here, a faint echo in the still air. I opened the wardrobe. It was empty, except for the faint scent of lavender, stronger here than anywhere else. I ran my hands along the wooden interior, searching for any hidden compartments, any secret panels. Nothing. I checked the vanity, pulling out its empty drawers. Nothing. Frustration began to build. The house was a fortress of secrets, and I didn't have the code. I sat down on the dusty floor, leaning my head back against the wall, feeling a familiar wave of despair wash over me. Maybe this was a dead end. Maybe the only thing she had left me was this empty shell of a house, a monument to a life I never had. My eyes roamed the room, the flashlight beam playing over the floorboards. Most were uniform, straight lines of dark wood. But then I saw it. Near the wall, partially hidden by the shadow of the bed frame, one board was slightly shorter than the others. Its edge wasn't perfectly flush. It was almost imperceptible. But in this house, where everything else seemed so deliberately placed, it stood out. My heart started to pound. I crawled over, my flashlight held tight. I examined the board. There was no knob, no handle. I tried to pry it up with my fingers, but it wouldn't budge. I remembered the pry bar I'd bought. I ran downstairs, my footsteps echoing loudly in the silent house, and came back with it. I wedged the tip of the pry bar into the thin crack at the edge of the board. I pushed down. The old wood groaned in protest. I applied more pressure, sweat beading on my forehead. With a sharp crack, the nails gave way, and the board popped up. I dropped the pry bar and peered into the darkness below. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, and I saw it. Nestled in the dark space between the floorboards and the ceiling of the room below was a small tin box. It was the size of a shoebox with a simple latch on the front. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lift it out. It was heavy, heavier than it should be. I carried it over to the window, where the morning light was now streaming in, and set it on the floor. I stared at it for a long moment, my breath held tight in my chest. This was it. This was the heart of the house. The reason for the locked door, the empty rooms, the long wait. With a trembling finger, I lifted the rusty latch. It sprang open with a soft click. I took one last deep breath and opened the box. The first thing I saw was money, bundles of it wrapped in faded rubber bands, 20s, 50s, 100s. It wasn't a king's ransom, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It had to be thousands of dollars. Enough to live on for months, maybe even a year. Enough to start over anywhere. But beneath the money, there was something else. Something far more valuable. It was a stack of letters, tied together with a faded blue silk ribbon. On top of the stack was a single envelope, with one word written on it in that same elegant, looping script I recognized from the envelope Miss Albright had given me. Leo. My hands were trembling as I slipped the ribbon off and picked up the first letter. The paper was soft and thin, almost translucent with age. I unfolded it carefully, my eyes scanning the words that flowed across the page. "My dearest Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you are 18. It means you are a man. And it means our long, silent wait is finally over. I hope, with every fiber of my being, that you are safe. I hope that the world has been at least a little kind to you, my son. I know you must have so many questions, and I know you must hate me. The world will have told you that I abandoned you. It is a simple, cruel word, and it is the story I had to let them believe. But it is not the truth. The truth is, I did not abandon you. I protected you. Your father, he was not a good man, Leo. When you were born, he was charming, and I was in love, and I believed we could have a happy life here, in this house that has been in our family for generations. But a darkness lived in him, a violence and a greed that I did not see until it was too late. He became involved with dangerous people who do not forgive debts, and he created many debts. When you were almost 2, he disappeared. At first, I was relieved. But then his associates came looking for him and for the money he owed them. They were not kind men. They threatened me. They threatened you. They believed I knew where he and his money had gone. I knew then that we could not be safe here, not together. So I made the hardest choice of my life. I created a story. I told the authorities I was unstable, that I couldn't care for you. I relinquished my rights, a legal act that severed my connection to you in the eyes of the law. It broke my heart into a million pieces, Leo, but it was the only way. By putting you into the system, I made you invisible to them. You became a ward of the state, moved from place to place, your location sealed in a confidential file. They could not find you. You were a ghost. You were safe. I left this house, this money, and these letters for you. The deed was legally transferred, to be held in trust until you came of age. This house is yours, free and clear. No one can take it from you. The money is for you to start a new life. And these letters are my attempt to explain, to give you back the story that was stolen from you. Know this, my son, every day for the past 16 years I have thought of you. Every decision I've made has been for you. Leaving you was not an act of abandonment, it was an act of love, the only kind I could give. Your loving mother, Sarah. I finished the letter, and the paper slipped from my fingers. The silence of the room rushed in, but it was different now. It was filled with the voice from the page. My mother's voice. The carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart for 16 years, the defenses against the pain of being unwanted, all of it crumbled to dust in an instant. I lowered my head into my hands and I wept. I cried for the little boy who grew up believing he was thrown away. I cried for the mother who had to perform the most unnatural act imaginable, severing herself from her child in order to save him. I cried for the 16 years we had lost, the stolen birthdays, the scraped knees she never got to kiss, the bedtime stories she never got to read. It was a storm of grief, of rage, of a profound and overwhelming love that had been waiting for me here, all this time, hidden under a floorboard. The story I had told myself my whole life was a lie. I wasn't abandoned. I was protected. I wasn't unwanted. I was loved so fiercely that my mother had sacrificed her own life, her own happiness, to ensure my survival. The weight of that sacrifice, the sheer magnitude of her love, was a heavier burden than the pain of abandonment had ever been. It was a beautiful, terrible, crushing weight. Listen, if you've ever had your entire world, your entire understanding of who you are, flipped upside down by a single piece of paper, a single conversation, a single discovery, then I see you. It's a terrifying and sacred moment when the story you thought was your life dissolves and a new, more complicated truth takes its place. This community, this channel, it's for us. It's for the people who have had to rebuild themselves from the bedrock of a new reality. If you feel that, take a second. Let me know in the comments about a time you discovered a truth that changed everything. You don't have to share details, just the feeling. Your story matters here, you matter here. Now, let's get back to the farmhouse, because reading that first letter wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The real fight was still to come. I spent the rest of the day in that dusty bedroom, reading through the stack of letters one by one. Each one was a piece of the puzzle, a snapshot of the 16 years I had been gone. She wrote about her life on the run, moving from town to town, working odd jobs, always looking over her shoulder. She never stayed in one place for long. She described the ache of seeing other mothers with their sons in the park, the hollow feeling on my birthday each year. She wrote about her dreams for me, that I would be strong and kind, and that one day I would understand. She had been saving money the entire time, every spare dollar tucked away for me, for the future she was building for me in secret. The cash in the tin box was the physical manifestation of 16 years of sacrifice. It was sacred. In the last few letters, her tone changed. She wrote that she had found a place where she felt safe, a small, quiet community where she could finally breathe. She mentioned she had been seeing a lawyer in Sparrow Creek, a man named Abe Thompson, to make sure all the legal arrangements for the property were ironclad. She wanted to ensure that when I turned 18, the transfer would be seamless, that no one could challenge my ownership. "Mr. Thompson is a good man," she wrote. "He's old and a bit gruff, but his heart is in the right place. He holds the rest of the paperwork for you. When you are ready, go and see him. He will know who you are. Abe Thompson." The name gave me my next step. The sun was setting again, but this time I wasn't afraid of the dark. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt mine. It felt like her. That night I cleared the dust from the floor in her room and slept there, my head on my duffel bag, the tin box beside me. I slept more soundly than I had in my entire life. The next morning I walked back into town. I felt like a different person. I was no longer Leo, the foster kid. I was Leo Vance, son of Sarah Vance. I had a history. I had a home. It gave me a sense of solidity, a feeling of being anchored to the world. I found the office of Abe Thompson, attorney at law, squeezed between the hardware store and a closed-down bakery. The window was dusty, the gold leaf lettering peeling. I pushed open the door and entered a small cluttered office that smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. A man, who must have been in his late 70s, sat behind a massive oak desk, surrounded by teetering stacks of paper. He had a shock of white hair, a face like a roadmap of wrinkles, and sharp, intelligent eyes that peered at me over a pair of reading glasses. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly sound. "My name is Leo Vance," I said. "I believe you have something for me." His eyes widened slightly. He took off his glasses and studied my face, a long, searching look. He nodded slowly. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Your mother, she was a fine woman, stubborn as a mule, but a fine woman." He stood up and walked over to a large black filing cabinet. He spun the dial on a combination lock, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick accordion file. He placed it on the desk in front of me with a heavy thud. "This is yours," he said. "Everything Sarah set up for you. The final deed transfer, tax records paid up for the next 5 years, a bank account she opened in your name with a small amount of seed money. She thought of everything." I opened the file, my hands tracing over the documents. It was all there. A complete turnkey inheritance. She had paved the way for me, thought of every possible obstacle and cleared it. But as I sifted through the papers, I found something else. A separate folder at the very back. It was labeled Viridian Holdings. Inside were copies of letters, increasingly aggressive in tone, all addressed to the estate of Sarah Vance. They were offers to purchase the property at 1414 Blackbird Lane. The first offer from 6 months ago was low. The most recent one from just last week was significantly higher, but still felt cheap. It was for $50,000. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the letter. Mr. Thompson sighed, sinking back into his chair. "That's the trouble I was hoping you wouldn't have to deal with right away. Viridian Holdings is a big development company. They've been buying up land all over the county. They want to build one of those luxury golf communities. Your property, the Vance Farm, is the last piece of the puzzle. It sits right in the middle of the land they need to connect their two largest parcels. $50,000. To me, it was a fortune. It was more money than the cash in the box. Combined, it was enough to go anywhere, do anything. A completely new start, free and clear of this dusty old town and its ghosts. I could sell, I could take the money and just disappear, be free." Mr. Thompson must have seen the calculation in my eyes. "It's a tempting offer, son, especially for a young man starting out. But you should know something. That land is worth 10 times what they're offering. At least, they know the house is dilapidated. They think they're dealing with a distant relative who will be happy to take a quick payday for a property they've never seen. They're trying to steal it from you." The word steal hung in the air. These people, this faceless corporation, were trying to take the last thing my mother had given me, the sanctuary she had bled and sacrificed to preserve for me. A cold anger, sharp and clean, cut through the temptation of the money. "She wanted me to have this place," I said, more to myself than to him. "She did," Mr. Thompson confirmed. "She loved that farm. She said it was the only place she ever felt safe. She said she hoped it would be that for you, too." I closed the file. The choice seemed so clear a moment ago. Take the money and run. It was the survival instinct that had been drilled into me my whole life. Don't get attached. Don't put down roots. Stay moving. But my mother's love, the story in her letters, had changed me. Running felt like a betrayal of her sacrifice. "What happens if I say no?" I asked. "They'll keep pressuring you," he said grimly. "They might try to use legal loopholes, condemn the property for being unsafe, use eminent domain. They have deep pockets and a team of ruthless lawyers. It won't be an easy fight. An easy life bought with $50,000, or a hard fight for a broken-down house and a piece of land." I looked down at my hands. For the first time, they didn't feel like the hands of a victim, of a boy shuffled through the system. They felt like the hands of a man who owned something worth defending. "Tell them no," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Tell them the property is not for sale." A slow smile spread across Abe Thompson's wrinkled face. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "Your mother would be proud." He stood up and stuck out his hand. "Welcome home, Leo Vance. Now, let's get to work." Leaving Mr. Thompson's office, I felt a surge of purpose I'd never experienced before. The world was no longer a series of obstacles to be survived. It was a place where I could make a stand. The fight with Viridian Holdings wasn't just about land. It was about honoring my mother's legacy. It was about proving that the Vance name meant something more than a signature on a surrender form. I returned to the farmhouse with a new perspective. It was no longer a dusty relic of the past, but the battlefield for my future. I spent the next few days taking stock, cleaning, and exploring every inch of the house and the land it sat on. The property was bigger than I realized, nearly 50 acres of overgrown fields and dense woods, with a small clear creek, Sparrow Creek I presumed, running through the back of it. I started with the house itself, sweeping away 16 years of dust and cobwebs. It was hard, physical work, but it felt good. With every bucket of grimy water I tossed out, with every window I scrubbed clean, I felt like I was not just cleaning a house, but clearing the fog from my own soul. I was letting the light in, both literally and figuratively. As I worked, I kept thinking about my mother's letters. There was one line in her final letter that had stuck with me. She wrote, "Your father always said the heart of this house wasn't in the hearth, but in the roots." I had assumed it was a metaphor. But as I worked in the cellar, clearing out rotten shelves and old junk, I started to wonder. The cellar was cool and damp, with stone walls and a hard-packed dirt floor. In the center of the room was the massive stone base of the fireplace from the living room above. The hearth. I walked around it, running my hands over the rough-hewn stones. It seemed solid. But then my fingers brushed against a stone on the side facing away from the stairs, a stone that felt slightly loose. My curiosity piqued. I pushed on it. It wiggled. I grabbed my pry bar and worked it into the mortar around the stone. With a grating scrape, the stone came free. I pulled it out and set it on the floor. Peering into the dark cavity behind it, I saw another metal box. This one was smaller than the first. A heavy-duty lockbox, not a simple tin. It was locked with a combination dial. My heart sank. A combination. It could be anything. I tried my birthday, nothing. I tried her birthday, guessing from the dates and the letters. Nothing. I felt a surge of frustration. The answer was right here, inches away, but impossibly out of reach. I sat on the cellar floor, staring at the lock, my mind racing. The heart of this house wasn't in the hearth, but in the roots. Roots. What could that mean? I thought about the giant oak tree in the front yard, the one that stood like a guardian over the house. I thought about family roots, the generations of Vances who had lived here. Then another memory from the letters surfaced. In one, she had described carving my name on the door. "I carved your name on your second birthday, October 12th. She wrote 4 letters for the 4 seasons you had been with me. 6 numbers for the day you made my world complete. 4 letters, 6 numbers. My mind leaped. L-E-O. That was only 3 letters. What was the 4th? Vance? V? No, that didn't feel right. 4 letters, 6 numbers. Could the combination be a word and a date? I thought back to the carving on the door. Leo, and the date, 10 and 12. 6 numbers. But what was the 4-letter word? I ran upstairs and burst out the front door, my eyes immediately finding the carving. I had been so overwhelmed when I first saw it, I hadn't truly examined it. Now I looked closer. The letters L-E-O were clear, but next to them, slightly fainter, slightly smaller, was another word. Home. H-O-M-E. 4 letters. My breath caught in my chest. The carving didn't just say my name, it said L-E-O Home. I sprinted back down to the cellar, my heart hammering. I knelt in front of the lockbox. I spun the dial, H-O-M-E, then the numbers, 1012 for October 12th. I pulled on the handle. It didn't budge. My hope plummeted. "Wait," she wrote, "the day you made my world complete." My second birthday, not the date, the year. I was born 2 years before that date was carved. I quickly did the math. If I was turning 18 now, then 16 years ago was the year she left. I looked up the year. I tried again. H-O-M-E. 12012 in the last 2 digits of the year. With a loud, satisfying click, the lock disengaged. My hands were shaking as I opened the box. It wasn't filled with money or letters. It was filled with evidence. There were notebooks filled with my father's handwriting, detailing transactions, names, and dates. There were photographs of him with men in expensive suits, shaking hands outside of shiny corporate buildings. There were audio cassettes, the kind from an old micro recorder. And sitting on top of it all was one last sealed letter. This one just said, "The Choice." I opened it. "My dearest Leo," it read, "if you found this, you have found the truth I could not write in the other letters. It was too dangerous. Your father did not just owe money to criminals. He was one of them, and his partners were not small-time thugs. They were powerful men who hid behind legitimate businesses. One of those businesses, I have come to learn, is a development company called Viridian Holdings. The name hit me like a physical blow. They are the ones who hounded him for money, the ones who drove him to his ruin, and the ones who ultimately made him disappear. They wanted this land, Leo. Your father refused to sell it. It was the one line he wouldn't cross. After he was gone, they came for me. They have been trying to get this land for 16 years. Their offer to buy it is not a business transaction. It is the final act of a long and ugly campaign. The contents of this box are everything I could gather. Evidence of their crimes. Your father's journals, recordings of their threats. It is enough, I think, to expose them, to bring them down. But doing so will be dangerous. These are not men who play by the rules. They will fight back, and they will fight dirty. And so, I leave you with a choice. It is the last and most important gift I can give you. In the other box there is enough money for you to leave. You can take it, walk away from all of this, and build a new life for yourself anywhere in the world. No one would blame you. You have already been through more than any child should have to endure. You owe this place, and this fight, nothing. Your safety, your happiness is all I have ever wanted. Or, you can stay, you can use what is in this box. You can fight for this home, for our name, for the justice your father never got, and that I could never achieve on my own. It is the harder path, it is the more dangerous path, but it is also the path to reclaiming everything they took from us. The choice is yours, my son, freedom or home, escape or justice. Whatever you decide, know that I love you, and I am proud of the man you have become. I sat there in the cold, damp cellar, the weight of the world on my shoulders. The easy way out was dangling right in front of me, a bag full of cash and a lifetime of looking over my shoulder, or a box full of evidence and a fight against a powerful, corrupt enemy. My mother had given me an escape hatch, but she had also given me a sword. I thought about the kids back at St. Jude's, the ones who, like me, had been told they were worth nothing. I thought about the systemic pressure, the faceless corporations like Viridian that chew up little people and spit them out. All my life, I had been running, surviving, staying invisible. But my mother hadn't raised a ghost. She had raised a son, and the son of Sarah Vance did not run. I closed the box, the decision settling in my soul with a profound and unshakable certainty. I picked it up, carried it up the cellar stairs, and walked out the front door into the sunlight. I didn't even stop to lock the door behind me. I had a long walk into town and a lawyer to see. The fight for Blackbird Lane had just begun. I walked into Abe Thompson's office without knocking. He looked up from his desk, a flicker of surprise in his eyes when he saw the heavy lockbox I placed on the corner of his desk. I didn't say a word, just spun the dial, HOME1012, and opened the lid. He stared at the contents, the journals, the photos, the tapes, for a long moment. He picked up one of the notebooks, his bushy white eyebrows rising higher and higher as he flipped through the pages. He looked from the journal to me, his expression a mixture of shock and something that looked like grim satisfaction. "My God, kid," he breathed, his voice raspy. "Your mother, she was playing for keeps." "She left me a choice," I said, my voice steady. "Run or fight." I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not running." A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. It transformed him from a tired old country lawyer into a predator who'd just caught the scent of blood. "Good," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Because I hate those Viridian bastards." He pulled a dusty, ancient-looking tape player from a drawer. "Let's see what kind of ammunition your mother left us." We spent the rest of the day in that cluttered office, piecing together the story hidden in the box. The journals detailed my father's descent into a world of money laundering and intimidation, all orchestrated by a handful of executives at Viridian Holdings. The photos put names to faces. The audio tapes were the real bombshell. They were recordings of my mother's conversations with Viridian's enforcers after my father disappeared. Their threats were explicit. Their connection to my father's disappearance undeniable. They weren't just developers. They were mobsters in suits. "This is more than enough to stop the development," Abe said, leaning back in his chair, a look of awe on his face. "This is enough to put them in prison, but we have to be smart about it. We can't just walk into the local police station. Viridian has half the county officials in their pocket." He explained the plan. We would make copies of everything. The originals would be stored in a safe deposit box. We would leak one of the less incriminating tapes to a state-level investigative reporter Abe knew and trusted, just enough to get the authorities sniffing around. We wouldn't show our whole hand. We would use the threat of the rest of the evidence as leverage. Our goal wasn't just to win, it was to make them go away forever. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet, intense activity. I helped Abe copy and catalog the evidence. During the day, I worked on the farm, clearing brush, patching the roof, and making the house livable. I used some of the money from the first box to buy tools and supplies from George at the hardware store. He never asked any questions, just gave me a knowing look and a discount. The people in town were starting to recognize me. They'd nod as I passed, a silent acknowledgement. I was no longer just a stranger. I was the Vance boy, the one who was fixing up the old place. One afternoon, I was on a ladder painting the front porch railing when a sleek black car I didn't recognize pulled up the driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was one of the men from the photographs. "Leo Vance?" he asked, his smile oily and false. "I'm Mark Stenson from Viridian Holdings. I've been leaving messages with your lawyer. He seems to be unresponsive." "He's been busy," I said, not bothering to come down from the ladder. "I'm sure," he said, his eyes scanning the work I'd done on the house, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Look, kid, we made you a very generous offer. $50,000. For a place that's barely standing. You should have taken it. It's not for sale," I said simply. His smile vanished. "Let's not be naive. Everything is for sale. We're prepared to increase our offer. $75,000. That's my final offer. Take it and walk away. Or we can make things difficult. There are zoning violations, safety codes. A house this old, it would be a shame if the county had to condemn it." It was a threat delivered with a smile. The same kind of threat they had used on my mother. But I wasn't my mother. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't scared. I finally climbed down from the ladder and stood in front of him. I was taller than him. "Here's my final offer," I said, my voice low and cold. "You and your friends at Viridian are going to drop your bid for my land. You're going to pull all your projects in Sparrow Creek County. You're going to get in this car, drive away, and never come back. And you're going to pray that I don't release the rest of the tapes." The color drained from his face. He knew. The leak to the reporter had worked. They knew we had something. They just didn't know how much. He stared at me, his mind racing, trying to calculate the odds. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He saw I wasn't bluffing. "This isn't over," he hissed. "It is for you," I said. "Now get off my property." He got back in his car, his composure shattered. He sped down the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. I watched him go, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I had done it. I had faced the monster, and I hadn't flinched. 2 weeks later, Abe called. The state attorney general's office had opened a formal investigation into Viridian Holdings, citing financial irregularities. Their stock had plummeted. All their local projects, including the golf community, were suspended indefinitely. We had won. It wasn't a flashy courtroom drama victory. It was a quiet, decisive win, achieved through strategy and courage. The monsters had been driven back into the shadows. They weren't in jail, not yet, but their hold on Sparrow Creek was broken. That evening, I sat on the newly painted porch of my farmhouse, a home I had literally fought for. The work was far from over. The house still needed a new roof, new plumbing, 1,000 other repairs. I was working a part-time job at George's hardware store to make ends meet. Life wasn't easy, but it was mine. I looked out over the fields as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. The land was quiet, peaceful, safe. I had chosen home. I had chosen justice, and in doing so I had finally, truly come into my inheritance. It wasn't the money or the land. It was the strength I found in myself, the legacy of love my mother had left me, and the chance to build a future on my own terms. The carving on the door was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a promise I had fulfilled. Leo home. I was home. So that's how I found my home. Not just the house, but myself. It wasn't in the letting go, but in the holding on. The lesson for me, the one that was written in dust and secrets and my mother's love, was that inheritance isn't about what you're given. It's not about money or land or a name. It's about the story you choose to carry forward, the battles you choose to fight. Home isn't a place you arrive at. It's a place you build and a place you defend with everything you've got. It's a choice you make every single day. My mother gave me 2 choices, the freedom of escape or the responsibility of home. I chose home, and in doing so, I found a deeper freedom than I ever could have imagined. The freedom to have roots, the freedom to belong. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in second chances and the power of fighting for what you love, please subscribe and become part of this community. We are all fighting our own battles, defending our own pieces of sacred ground, and I want you to share one thing in the comments that you're choosing to fight for in your own life. It doesn't have to be a house or a company. It can be a relationship, a dream, your own peace of mind. Let's fill this space with our collective strength. Thank you for listening. We're all in this together.